Hello, I'm Casey Kirkendall, and this is my Module 2 synthesis. So Module 2 started out with us talking a lot about poverty and the effects that it has on a child's education. And to me, the biggest effects that poverty has, or first of all, it's going to take away some of the students' resources, especially at home, in the places that they have to do homework, the food they have to eat, which is really important for education, just solely to keep a child healthy. They're going to learn a lot better, retain a lot more information, the healthier they are. And also, if a child's living in poverty, there's going to be times where they have more important things to worry about than homework and eating right. I mean, they might be looking for a place to stay that night. You just don't know. So, time constraints definitely a big thing on a child when they are forced to be looking for somewhere to stay or something to eat rather than doing their homework. Um, After we moved to week 8, we started to talk about how equal does not mean identical. So students, yes, students need to be treated equally. Each student needs to be able to have the same opportunity to succeed as every other student. But what's important to remember is that each student is very different, and this can be in the form of the way that they learn, the background, the culture they come from, their family, diversity, and the way that their family is set up in their relationship with their family. And so some students may need not a different chance, but a different way to get there, just because they don't have the same opportunities that the other students might have. So it's just important to remember to take an individual approach with each student when helping them succeed. As we moved to week 9, we started to talk about assessment and listening and seeing a student. And so this is a hits home for me because I really am not a fan of standardized tests, and unfortunately, I think that's the number one way that we are testing our kids these days, and we automatically assume if they don't do well on these tests that they don't know the information and maybe the teachers aren't teaching it to them, when really I don't think this is true hardly at all. Some students simply do not take standardized tests very well. They feel the stress and the pressure, and they can't think while they're taking the test, and it doesn't reflect in their scores what they actually know. So when it comes to listening and seeing, I just think that a teacher should really get to know a student and find out how they learn, find out how they can express what they learn, and that's going to show so much more than a standardized test. Going back to equal and identical in week 8, each student is different. You can't expect to um, measure them all in the same way in terms of ability and knowledge. Week 10, we started to talk about scaffolding, which is basically just helping a child work through a child with step by step through a problem, usually a more challenging problem, instead of just throwing them in and saying, here you go, figure it out. You give them the tools they need to figure out the problem, maybe break it down into smaller problems. You kind of find a child's zone of proximal development, which is just the range of problems that they can solve with assistance from a teacher or their peers or other assistants. And so that's scaffolding. And then finally, in week 11, we talked about effective questioning. A lot of teachers will just go through each class period and kind of ask questions right out of the book. Maybe the students already know them. The answer almost becomes automatic. Who was the first president? George Washington. Okay, well, how do you know this? You can ask other questions to kind of get students to think a little deeper about it. And one thing that my cooperating teacher did in my practicum was students would answer a fairly obvious question. I mean, everybody in the room would know the answer, and then she'd go, well, why do you answer that way? Or why do you think that? And then the students sometimes are left with a look on their face that are all confused, like, is that the right answer? But really, we're just trying to get them to think a little deeper, maybe even think cognitively about their answer, so it's not just automatic and they can actually retain this and use it later on in life. And another thing that I think is important to mention when questioning students and trying to get them to participate in class is just to remind them that it's okay to be wrong. I feel like, especially in elementary school I'm from, um, when the teacher would ask to raise hands, I mean, students were afraid to raise hands, especially if they weren't 100% sure because they didn't want to be wrong. They felt like they were dumb or going to be made fun of. The teacher wouldn't like them as much if they didn't give the right answer to the question. So I think it's really important to remind students that it's okay to be wrong. And I think my cooperating teacher did an amazing job with that. She would ask a question at the start of a new subject or at the beginning of the day, and you'd see every single hand in the room shoot up, wanting to answer, wanting to be right, wanting to learn. So I thought that was really cool. And that was Module 2. Thank you so much for watching.